I'm Katy McKinney, founder and head of school for Lafayette Academy, and you're back at the Lady K Show. So we talked in one of the recent podcasts about this idea of the Western paideia, and that an education that is rooted in this Western tradition offers students the ability to have skills and habits that would be necessary to live a free and a fulfilling life, such as in a republic. And of course, being in a free culture, in a free environment, you're able to build good and strong families. And these good families build great communities. And of course, these communities make great states, and great states make great countries. So what you do, if it's any encouragement, what you do in your little family may feel like it's just small and little, but in essence, it reverberates. It has this ripple effect, and it impacts so many around you. And I thank you for what you're doing. And whenever I see a mom or a dad in a grocery store, on the airplane, wherever, and they're holding the line, oh, in my heart, I just say, thank you, thank you, thank you for doing that. And sometimes I'll go up there and I'll say, hey, I just want to say thank you. It was fun to see you hold the line, and it gives me encouragement too. So we can gain inspiration from each other. So in any case, all of these institutions, from our family all the way up to our state and our nation, we have to have it function well, right? If we're going to have a free and flourishing republic. And since the founding of our republic, our education of our young in both moral and civic virtue has been considered one of the essential ingredients of the survival of our nation. It's a high and weighty calling, in my opinion, and it takes the dedicated work of every single one of us, from our small little families, as we've talked about, all the way up. But how do we make this happen? That's kind of the key question. And I would say, as we mentioned the Greeks in my previous podcast, like the Greeks, I too am interested in something that's longer lasting for our children. We want our children to love these high ideals. We haven't really talked about this, but the idea of victory or health or wisdom. These are very, very high things, and we want our children to strive towards that. Little side note, my daughter, when she was in 8th grade, she was reading To Kill a Mockingbird. And in that, she was taken with the attorney in the story. And she said, Mom, I want to be just like him. And I said, why is that? She's like, the way he's able to speak and persuade and to do it with such conviction and truth, she's like, it's just very inspiring. And she was moved by that. So those are those high ideals that we want our children to fall in love with and hopefully emulate as they continue to cultivate their own character, right? So that will give their life happiness and fulfillment and satisfaction as they grow. So I want to talk about the how. How do we do this? I want to show you a picture. This picture is a view of a root system of prairie plants. And I love this visual because for me it helps illustrate two things. One, it illustrates what is a classical education. And two, it can illustrate for us how we can nurture our children, our families, even ourselves, and our communities at large. So on the far left of this picture, you will see grass, if you can see it there clearly enough. Super tiny there, and you can see the root system there, and it's very tiny. And you can see that the root system barely penetrates the soil. But now I want you to look at some of those other prairie plants and their root systems. You can see, if you go down to the left-hand side, or I guess even the right-hand side, those are feet, those little markers, those little indicators, 1 all the way down to 15. And some of these prairie plants have root systems that reach down to 13, 14, even 15 feet, some cases even deeper. And that is, to me, very impressive. But I had a friend of mine explain to me the importance of this root system. And this is what I want to share with you, which I think goes back to how do we nurture in our children, the good, the true, and the beautiful. So, for example, I'm going to just give you 4 of the facts explained to me about prairie plants. Number 1, prairies contain some of the richest soils in the world. Number 2, the first 3 years of a prairie plant's life is spent stabilizing its root system. Number 3, the growth above the surface is very slow at best. And yet, meanwhile, below the surface, the root structure is catapulting itself downward, anchoring itself for a life that would be stable regardless of storms or sunshine or a drought or whatever. And number 4, because of this fantastic root system, these plants can adapt under most weather conditions. So now let's go into each one and how this relates to both classical education and how we, of course, nurture our children. Number 1, prairies contain some of the richest soils in the world. So when I think about the richest soil, I think about an education that's steeped in the classics. It's those high things, it's the great books, it's the philosophical titans, the timeless truths that come to mind. And because we study the great virtues in these stories, real, both real and imaginary, we see the whole of the human pageant, right? A classical education, like prairie plants and like the soil of prairie plants, a classical education can nourish the soul, like I talked to you about with my daughter. It was literally nourishing her soul. And through the pages of history, as we study history and gain knowledge, we are touched by the historical characters of the past. And it's through those examples that we get a pathway forward as to how we can be and cultivate our best self. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, the first 3 years of a prairie plant's life is spent stabilizing its root system. So in our youngest family members, maybe you have little people at home, we spend years stabilizing their learning or their understanding. We provide our little people a deep understanding of the English language. We do that through explicit handwriting and teaching them phonics, for example. In math, we pull back the veil and we show them exactly what's going on, how to do long division, how to do multiplication, all of those things, how to borrow. In all subjects, these are the building blocks of a root system. And a root system or a system of knowledge cannot be fabricated on faith or just do it like I told you to. A child's root system needs to be built on understanding. They need to pull that veil back and truly understand what is going on in order to make it their own. And all the while, this critical thinking or this pillar of reason is being developed and it's being strengthened. You probably heard that in order for an oak tree to stand, it has to have very deep and wide-reaching roots, and in which case it does. And likewise, the way I see it is our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, in order for them to stand, they're going to need truth and they're going to need understanding to support them. So this is essential work if we're going to make sure our children will be unaffected or eroded by the winds of ignorance or idiocy or shallowness. We have to work to help support their growth, and that's helping to stabilize their root system with a robust education. The growth above, so number 3, the growth above the surface is slow at best. So likewise, the growth of a child may not at first seem tangible. How many times have we been like, oh my gosh, how many times have I said X, Y, and Z? Or you're trying to teach them how to tie their shoes or pick up their stuff in their room or whatever it is, and you feel like there is no growth, period. There's no growth at all. But I have faith because all the while I do feel as though a child, when they're exposed to high quality and substantial content, the depth in their thought, their own root structure, is catapulting itself downward, and it is also anchoring itself for a life of stability, regardless of ignorance or darkness. So those prairie plants, that root system is slow, it's purposeful, it's methodical, and our teaching, when you teach in classical education, it's exactly the same. It's slow, it's purposeful. Slow, I wouldn't say that has a negative connotation. It's systematic, because it's really hinging and capitalizing on the developmental process of the brain, and there's a good reason for that. We don't want to skip or have any gaps along the way. So similarly with a root system of a prairie plant. Number 4, because of their fantastic root systems, prairie plants can adapt under any weather condition. It's really quite fantastic. It's amazing. So with roots that reach down to 13, 14, 15 feet, prairie plants actually have their roots intertwine with the other plants that are right around them. And what that does is it fortifies their own structure that can withstand the harshest conditions. For example, drought or horrendous winds or even fire. Those intertwined roots are untouched. They're they cannot be broken apart, and it really eliminates any potential threats of erosion. So, in fact, it's a non-issue. Erosion and drought and fire and wind, all of that is a non-event. It's a non-issue when those prairie roots are well entwined. So that system holds together, and that prairie plant can come back beautifully. The other beautiful thing about it is that prairie plants don't need any human management. They don't need to be maintained. They are self-sufficient and they are self-governed. So, likewise, this fantastic root system, or that deep understanding within a child, is becoming, for example, when you have that deep understanding rooted solidly, you're going to see that manifested by the child being a master of the English language, or being a skillful mathematician, or a passionate historian, or a perceptive artist, or a lover of music. And metaphysically speaking, this child can be unimpressed with feckless claims that come their way, suggestions that say, oh, you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, you're not capable enough, whatever that is. That child can be unflappable to those suggestions because their roots are so deep. Let me give you a quick example. In one of my podcasts, I talked about a little girl of ours at our school who was very, very shy. And we basically were redefining those roots for her. And so when she then came in contact with different challenges, and frankly, they were just suggestions coming to her thought that, oh, you can't do that recitation in front of the class. You're not capable. Oh, you can't take a test. You're just going to freeze up. Those kind of thoughts coming in. She had a tool to challenge that, which was, it is like me to take a test without interruption. She was able to utilize that, and that was part of her root system now. And she was able to use it again and again, and as she did so, that particular root was catapulting itself downward. That enabled her to be more stable. And she could lean on it. And even if she did get knocked down, she was able to resurrect herself more quickly. It would take her hours in the past. It would almost ruin her entire day. Now it's gotten to the point where when she was kind of progressing through this, she could correct herself within 30 minutes. And of course, we complimented her on that. She wrote that down. Yeah, I was able to regain my composure within 30 or 60 minutes. Now, it's even faster, if not even a non-event, because she's able to counteract it so quickly. So this is what we want for our children. That's more on the character side, but when it comes to mathematics, if they're learning their math facts and they're really fluent with their math facts, or they're learning their phonics and they're becoming extremely fluent in reading, this understanding allows them to be just a more complete, better version of themselves. It was always there. We just had to give them the right tools to be able to see it. Okay, lastly, the roots help hold the soil together to minimize erosion. So this prairie root system, just like that prairie root system that's held firmly in place, a child's carefully cultivated character, when it is rooted firmly in place with that beautiful character, it anchors him amidst storms or temptations, like we just talked about. And furthermore, when those root systems are intertwined, so example, when that child's understanding is intertwined with another child's understanding, particularly classical to classical, or within a family, and those self-governing principles of natural rights, natural law, freedom to think, freedom to act, the child needs little management from the outside. We talked about one of the, in the prior podcast, about the entitlement trap. And when we give our children the tools to be independent, make their own choices, govern their own thinking, correct their thinking, they start to, that strength allows them to manage themselves. And that's what with Winning in Mind, the mental management system, that's what we want for our children. We want them to be able to mentally manage themselves, so they don't have these huge swings back and forth as to, what they're thinking or what they're choosing to do. We want them to have that constant North Star in front of them that they're voluntarily following. So the idea here is that the child eventually will be able to contribute positively in a variety of ways to their community, be it their family, their school. They're ready to take care of themselves. They're ready to take care of their progeny, their communities, their church, their republic. And lastly, with each plant doing its job of growing, fortifying, and intertwining, each individual doing its job of fortifying its understanding, its root system. The intertwined roots help hold that soil together to minimize erosion. And in other words, the work that we do as parents, as communities, really works to elevate and educate our children, and it supports the enlightening of man, and that in turn supports our American tapestry. So all of this is going back to the idea of how do we nurture this in our children, and we have to make sure that they have an education that is complementing what you do at the home. In the home, we want it to complement perhaps what it is your church is fortifying and supporting. We want those things to all work together in concert. And I think this prairie root system illustration, for me anyway, really helps me visualize what it is that a great education, and I will say from a bias standpoint, is a classical education, what that can do for a child. But you couple that with a family that's rooted in great virtue, that's just really tight-knit, you've got a winning recipe to help cultivate fabulous future citizens that will hopefully continue to do the same for future generations.